All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. This is our Disabilities Awareness webinar presented to you by the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I will be your facilitator today. My name is Marco Martinez. I'm the Vice President of the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. I'm also the DEIAA Chair of our committee for the Student Senate for California Community Colleges as well. So just a few housekeeping rules. This webinar is being recorded and will be archived on the Student Senate YouTube channel. Live transcription will be turned on, and there are 2 American Sign Language interpreters present here today to assist us during the duration of the webinar, and all audience members will be muted. And to be recognized, please type your name or identifier in the chat, and the monitor will notify myself, and you will be recognized to speak. So who are we? The SSCCC, also known as the Student Center for California Community Colleges. We are a 501c3 nonprofit student-led organization that represents over 1.8 million students across all 116 California community colleges. And through the SSCCC, students have a formal and effective opportunity to participate in the formation of state policies that may have a significant impact on students. We are the representatives to our system partners, the Chancellor's Office, the Board of Governors, the California State Legislature, and very recently, I'm proud to say we have extended our advocacy efforts to the federal level and to the heart of our nation, to congressional members as well. So here's what will be happening today. This is our agenda, very quick and very brief. We just went over who we are, but we will be diving very quickly into the purpose. The student panel will be next, and then our DSPS representatives will also be contributing and being part of this panel today. So what's the reason why we're having this webinar? So in the spring of 2021, the SSCCC held a General Assembly where a resolution titled Disabled Student Awareness passed by a majority vote of the Delegate Assembly, which asked the SSCCC to hold an annual town hall to increase disability awareness, highlight resources available, and share models of effective practices in this area. And the SSCCC DIA committee was the one who worked extremely hard to put this on, as well as our student panelists here with us today. And we're so proud to finally be able to host this and, just kick off the end of the month like this. So here are our amazing student panelists. With us, we have Roussel Duget, Alexis Bravo Calvillo, Olivia Garcia Godos Martinez, and I will give them I'll give them the opportunity to introduce themselves, and so the audience can get to know them a little bit better in the next slide. All right, so our introductions for our student panelists. Maybe you could say your name to the audience, your major, your college, your position, and what do you hope to get out of this webinar? We can go in the order of the pictures on the previous slide. Roussel Duget, would you like to begin?
Hi, my name is Roussel Duget. I go to Chaffey College. I'm also the Chaffey College president and student trustee. And from this webinar, I hope to learn about other students' experience with DPS and also on the higher level on the administrative side for DPS, and just to interact with the community of students who are passionate about DPS services and students with disabilities that are identified and non-identified. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Roussel. Alexis?
Hello, my name is Alexis Bravo Calvillo, and I'm from Reedley College. I'm also the ASG president there, and I'm the first deaf, hard of hearing president that they've ever had there at Reedley College. I major in social work. And I think that this experience to get to be on this panel is a wonderful opportunity to get to see the perspective of other students as well as share my own, so that we can connect and help all the students that might benefit from it.
Thank you so much for that, Alexis. Olivia?
Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia Garcia Martinez, and I go to Sacramento City College. And my major is sociology. And what I hope to get out of the webinar is just to just to inform other students some of the issues that we have, and especially with the autistic community, which is not as talked about in DSPS. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all three of you for being here and sharing your experiences. And so let's dive right into that. So the first question I have with all of you, and then we can mix it up as the questions progress forward. So, we'll begin with Roussel, then Alexis, then Olivia, and then we could mix it up at the second question. But Roussel, can you share with us your experience with DSPS services? I believe you're muted.
Oh, thank you. I didn't even see that. You gotta pay attention now. My experiences with DPS services have been various. They've been helpful through my college journey, such as transportation, different accommodations with testing and such. So I've been able to avail myself of the services, and I think the colleges that they have these for all of us to get to participate and benefit from.
Thank you. Alexis?
I recall one of my experiences when I first started in Reedley College with DSPS. It's been a bit rocky. In 2022 was when I started working with them, and it was quite a challenge, especially as a deaf student. I know that a lot of the people at DSPS have a lot of experience working with other students who have disabilities, but most of them are hearing, such as people who use wheelchairs or have prosthetics or different kinds of disabilities. But I realized that they hadn't ever had a student like myself who didn't hear, and that caused a lot of strife and difficulty because they didn't know how to communicate with a deaf student. Even just communicating was a challenge from the beginning. Especially because as a deaf person who doesn't speak and who writes for the most part to communicate with hearing people, that was also an obstacle. So I had a hard time connecting with the people at DSPS. I often asked them to write, and I'd offer ideas and solutions so that I wouldn't feel stuck when I went to work with them. But I've really had quite a hard time just communicating so that we can understand each other and move forward from there. So a lot of time there's a lot of waiting in between getting the services that I need instead of getting things quickly the way hearing students can, because they go immediately and don't have a hard time communicating. And then sometimes getting facilitating communication like interpreters can be difficult too, because there's that waiting period again. A lot of my classes initially didn't offer interpreters, and I was missing a lot of information that was vital to my education. So that was a huge part of deprivation that I was experiencing since I arrived to college. I really think and I expected that these services would be automatically provided to me, but they weren't. It was really an issue just to get these accommodations, and it really impacted my experience at school and achieving the goal of graduation. So it's been 2 years so far, and I've extended it further rather than the traditional 4 years that I usually would need because of all of these obstacles that I've had to face as a deaf student. And a lot of times I have to be very assertive with my self advocacy compared to other deaf schools that might not have that because everything is provided automatically. Especially with in comparison to other deaf students who might attend schools where they already have all the services provided and they already know how to serve their deaf students. I have to educate the staff on how a deaf student needs what they need to succeed. So it's very frustrating, and I decided to really just advocate for myself and make sure that I'm not dropping out. I see a lot of deaf students dropping out because of the struggle that they face, and I've seen a lot of my peers drop out because of how frustrating it is. But I've decided to stay, and I don't want to throw the towel in the struggle, but it really is difficult, and it's really a serious issue, and it's exhausting. it really opened my eyes to see how much really needs to be done in that part of DSPS. Because every year it's an increasing challenge of becoming increasingly involved with DSPS and having to work with them. They're supposed to be there to support my success for graduation, but really it's become more difficult just working with them to get my basic needs accommodated. There are a variety of organizations that we need with like the CCCs and the RC. For example, with from Reedley and Fresno and Madera College and Calvi. I visited all of these colleges to compare what the services that they provided for and what services they provided compared to my school. And I realized that in Fresno, they had a lot of technological issues that weren't very accommodating for students. A lot of it was outdated and needed to be replaced, and it hadn't been so for many years. So that was something that I took note of, and that made communication difficult for a lot of other students. And a lot of the community colleges that I visited also had 0 interpreters. They had 1 full-time interpreter in one of the colleges that I had been to for a semester, but it was just 1 interpreter. And there were some issues regarding money, and they had to be laid off. So they had some personal issues that they couldn't stay because of how much they were being paid, but then they were left with no interpreter at my college. So it became even more challenging after that. So often I would go to meetings at the ASG, and as the president, I need to be participatory and active, but I couldn't because we'd have interpreters. We wouldn't have any. Everything was always spoken, and sometimes we would have cart services, but those aren't monitored well and they're often incorrect. And so it was very hard to even participate because I was constantly trying to figure out what was actually said and see what the corrections were on the transcription. A lot of the time it's too quick that I'm spending all my time trying to process instead of participating. As the president of the ASG, it would make me look bad when it was really, in fact, the school that wasn't providing the services that I needed to succeed in what I was trying to do.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Alexis. What really struck me is when you mentioned you had to advocate for yourself, and it comes to show the lack of accessibility for a lot of our students, especially when they pursue higher education in California, you know. But thank you so much for sharing that with us, and hopefully we're able to address that as we go on further in the webinar. If you could go back to the previous slide, please. Olivia?
Sorry, I'm muted. Thank you for the question. So I have a different story. I was diagnosed with autism roughly 2 years ago, and with being newly diagnosed, I really struggled with knowing what I needed as a DSPS student. So when I went to get DSPS help, it felt like they were asking me what I wanted versus they were trying to like find solution for me. But with that issue, I didn't know like what all they could offer to me, and it made kind of my experience at school not that great because I didn't use the services that they provided to me, and I wish that I had more like resources like brought to me versus me asking for the resources.
Thank you so much for that, Olivia. Next slide, please. All right, so our second question for our student panelists is, what are some challenges you have faced with these services? We can start off with you, Olivia.
Thank you for the question. So some of the challenges I faced are because I didn't know like all of the services that I could receive. I didn't use DSPS as much because I didn't know how it could really help me with my classes. And I think that's one of the issues with DSPS is that not all students know like what services they offer. And for someone like me that has autism, it's been hard getting used to like what I need or even knowing what I need. So when I went to DSPS for the first time, I didn't know like what I would need. So that was a challenge for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexis?
So I'll just share a few of the various challenges that I face. A lot of times when I meet with a person, it's often the first time that the other person has ever met a deaf person or has worked with an interpreter. So I always have to take the initiative of asking for an interpreter. And I've actually had to face situations where the other person did not want to have an interpreter present. And I would have to argue and reiterate why I needed one and why it would be impossible for us to communicate otherwise. So that is one of the struggles that I faced with people in the college system. Really, I would have imagined that entering into school and college and working with the SPS, I would feel comfortable and safe and taken care of. But I honestly have faced quite the opposite, where a lot of people aren't willing to accommodate or help or really open their minds to understand. So there's a lot of things that I haven't even attended to because of how difficult it is to get the accessibility, the fact that it feels very uncomfortable and people are quite unfriendly. I think it might be helpful to provide a training so that people know how like the right etiquette to work and communicate with deaf people. Also, I understand that the Wi-Fi is something that sometimes we can't control, but having higher technology that would allow for a good Wi-Fi connection is really important, because without a good Wi-Fi connection, a video feed that isn't clear would cause a lot of issues and impact what the interpreter can do, whether my interpreter is freezing. So it would be makes it very hard to understand and hold a conversation. That's a technical issue. And that's something that can be improved by having better technology with our schools. It's also very hard just to find the right interpreters. To recruit the right people, it's quite difficult. I've been to meetings where the interpreters there aren't very helpful, or where I've had to share my concerns and ask for better interpreters or even interpreters at all. And usually they can't find a solution for me. Just last semester, it was about the beginning of me running for president in the ASG club, and I was going to the meetings often. And it often happened that there were no improvements that I saw regarding accessibility. It's really been a challenge for me. I think the most helpful thing would be for people on staff to really open their eyes and their minds and to be willing to understand that maybe they don't understand and they need to learn a few different things, a few different skills to be able to work with deaf and hard of hearing students. And the problem with all of this is just the waiting time. A lot of the times I'm having to file for complaints and follow bureaucracy, but in all that time, I still don't have my accessibility met. And so then I'm just one person trying to fight a whole system while I'm still having to go through my education without a lot of the things that I need. And if I'm just one person, oftentimes they won't cater to my complaints quickly because I'm just one student. And so sometimes by the time that they've tried to fix it, there's already been a lot of damage done, a lot of things that I'm behind on. And there's also problems sometimes when there are overlapping, intersecting oppression that's going on. Sometimes as a Latinx person, I might face a bit of concern from people. And so I also face that problem where intersecting oppression. So those are a few of the main struggles that I've had.
Yes, I definitely agree. We do need more equitable and inclusive resources because a lot of these barriers our students face on a daily basis. And, you know, we're trying to be a system that can provide change and opportunity for all students, regardless of background. So I definitely agree with you, Alexis. Olivia. Olivia, you already went. Rizal.
Yes, thank you. Those are very insightful responses to what are some challenges. I think sometimes challenges are also, I've seen from professors, like sometimes you have an accommodation or something, and then they might have their own process of how they want you to exercise that, or they might not understand your accommodation and they might want you to give information that you necessarily don't have to, or different things like that. So I think it would be useful on the professor's side as well, for their continued education on working with students with disabilities. And then sometimes at the disability office, they have rules and it's like, okay, your rules like they have interfere with my disability, which is why I'm here. So it's kind of like, even within the disability office itself, they can be more accommodating or understanding when things rise that may actually stem from a person's disability. So I think that's another area that needs to be looked at, and that can truly serve students in a holistic, equitable manner. Yeah, those are some of the things. And I think, as the previous speaker had said, sometimes when you're one person and you have a unique disability, it can be hard to get services that are not common. So if it's not something that's like, oh, X, Y, and Z, then it seemed like, oh, well, why do you need that? Or, oh, like there's some resistance towards that. So, and I saw during the pandemic how everything transitioned to online. So when a group of people need it, then all of a sudden things can be changed when it's like a vast group. But when it was, say, one person needing, say, an online option, then, oh, no, we can't do that. So there's this resistance towards when people with disabilities ask for accommodations versus when someone, like when the general public or non-disabled people ask for something, a more willingness because they can relate and be like, oh yeah, like I need that too. When you're an other, when you're someone else and you're like, oh, I need this, and it's like more of an expectation for you to meet the standard versus understanding that different people have different standards, different abilities, and have different goals and obstacles in their education. And just even being a student, being at the college itself, like that can be an obstacle, just even getting in the seat. And I've seen it not just with myself, but with other disabled students as well. And professors sometimes understanding that and not understanding that. And sometimes it's not even just being disabled, but you're going through a grief. You've lost someone in your family. And I've seen professors not be or heard students tell me about professors who are not understanding of that. So sometimes you have like an acute problem or an acute illness, like you're sick for a little bit of time, but you still need them to work with you on that. And that's something as student government president trustee, I'm looking towards working to change for more equality in that regard. So those are some of the things I've seen within, like I said, within DPS itself, within the college with some of the professors, and then just generally in public for people with disabilities.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Rizal. I definitely agree. Our faculty, um, they need to be better prepared in order to, deliver an equitable education for all our students, because like we keep mentioning, these are challenges, they're faced every single day by all kinds of students. So definitely agree with you on that, Rizal. All right, next slide. All right, we're going to switch it up one more time. Alexis, would you like to go first? So how would you make improvements? I'm so sorry for not repeating the question.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing, both of you, my two peer panelists, for sharing your concerns and your struggles. I really appreciate getting to hear them as well. I think it's definitely going to be tough to make a change because often issues are looked at from a hearing perspective. And so the disabled perspective is often not considered, and people don't understand how to accommodate for it. And the system often shares misinformation, which makes it even more difficult to find the right solution. I think one of the best solutions, in my perspective, would be for there to be more partnership in the solutions that we come up with. if we're taking more into consideration the perspectives of the people around us, for there to be more partnership with people who have disabilities in DSPS, to advocate, not just for us to be the only ones who are advocating like we are now. I think that would be one good way to find better solutions. Secondly, as a representative of the deaf population, I think having more interpreters, for example, right now when we have this meeting at 4, after it's over, people are gone. But sometimes at the end, there's people who want to stay and ask questions and have a Q&A, but sometimes interpreters will leave because their work time is done. And so that would be a disadvantage to deaf students and hard of hearing students who need that accessibility past the time of the meeting, whereas a hearing student can stay and ask questions as long as they'd like. So I think extending the time for when we hire interpreters, like for meetings like this and other types of conferences, would be something helpful to create equity for deaf students. Third of all, I think having more awareness and exposure is, like we are now, one of the best ways to inform our faculty is to provide more specific and specialized training. Not given by a person who's not disabled, but given by people who have the disabilities that they're sharing on. Someone who can share from firsthand experience to share the right etiquette and the right things that need to be considered and provide them the knowledge that they need so that there's an improvement on the resources that we get. I know a lot of people tell us to wait and to be patient, but it's really a long process. And if there's more training that we provide more often, then we'll see change more quickly and people won't dismiss us as it has been done historically. We know that we have these issues because we've had them recorded and documented, but we often see that being thrown under the rug. So I think it's right about time for there to be a more specific conversation about disabled students graduating and making sure that we're not having that problem anymore, because we're in modern, we're in the 21st century. We shouldn't have a problem with disabled students having a lower graduation rate than non-disabled students. So I think having a requirement for faculty and staff to go to workshops, to have these workshops often, would be very helpful. And I think that's one way that we could achieve equity. Not just for once and all, just to put a Band-Aid on it, but something that would remedy the issue from here on out. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Alexis. Rousseau?
Thank you. Those are great ideas, and I agree with them. For me, I think that there's like a lot of different levels of things that can be done to help make improvements for students that have DPS services. One of them, I think, is outreach. Like, we need to make an inclusive environment that, and not just inclusive, but like welcoming and enthusiastic. Like, if you have a disability, even if you think you might have them, because some people, they are not identified, and then some people are, and there's stigma sometimes when you have a disability, like, oh, I don't want to get services because, I don't want people to find out, and that can be harmful. And when you need these things for your education. So I think really working to destigmatize students receiving services and coming in for services, I think that would help a lot. I think that having policies within DPS that allow for accommodations for students with disabilities would be really helpful. Once again, train faculty and staff, and, just seeing, are the rules or the different things we have set up, are they equitable? Are they helpful? Are we being proactive in our work to provide services for unique students, such as deaf interpreters? Like, I can totally see that being a problem for a student. And just, and it wasn't even just that. One time I was asking about note taking, and the office didn't have note takers at the time. And I'm like, what about students who really need that? Like, what are you doing to make sure that that is being offered? So if you have to look for grants, if you have to do whatever it takes to really provide these services for students so that they're there when they need them. Once again, being welcoming to have the disabled students utilize their services. And yeah, there's a lot of things, and I'm glad this panel is there so we can all share our ideas for what will make DPS more accessible. And once again, for students that need accommodations that are not typically needed or not a known accommodation, I think that having an open mind to that would really be useful, I think, administrators. So not just people in the DPS department, but the leadership on campus who are in charge of budgeting, who are in charge of the many programs. Like if you're brought an idea by disabled students, be open to that, look into that. Or if there's a gap that's causing them not to graduate, if there's a gap that they're complaining about or something, look into seeing what can be done, that not necessarily other schools have to be the ones doing that, but like your school be a pioneer in that area, set the example for other colleges and universities so that they can implement those and help disabled students. Because as sadly, we know statistically disabled students don't have as high a graduation rate as other students. And that's really unfortunate and unequitable, because we need different voices in the job market, in all of society. We need representation everywhere. And people with disabilities shouldn't be looked over as a segment that doesn't matter. I think sometimes the voice of disabled is quieted because we all have various disabilities, and even if we have the same disability, it can affect us in different ways. So that makes our unity sometimes harder. So I believe too, as disabled students and as disabled people, we should come together and use our voice, use the power that we do have to make the changes that we want to see. Don't be passive. Be part, like I say, be the change you want to see. Like, use your voice. And even if you can't be that voice, tell someone else that can be for you. So reach out. And like I said, whether you're administrator, faculty, student, non-disabled, disabled, all of us can play a role on making accommodations and making accessibility way better for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Rizzo. I definitely agree. Inclusive and more welcoming environments within all the colleges, because that's what makes us the California community college system. You know, we're able to offer the opportunity to any student who wants to pursue a higher education. But then the question is, well, once they're in college, where are the resources for them to be successful and, you know, have the same opportunities as any other student? So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Rizzo. Olivia?
Thank you very much for the question. So, how would I make improvements? I believe that we should start thinking of disability as a community rather than just a service, like DSBS as a service. There's centers for LGBTQ students, Latinx students, even African American students, but there isn't any like center for students with disabilities, and having like centers where disabled students can gather, and a place where events can happen, and just a place to socialize, and also to talk about a disability would be great, because I believe that in community we can make great things. So that's how I would improve DSBS. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Olivia. And I know Alexis had a few more comments. Alexis, if you would like to share those with us.
Yes, thank you so much. Oh, hold on. Let me see. I want to talk more about awareness and about exposure. And I don't mean like the popular concept of like awareness and exposure, but making sure that the success and the struggles that we see to get there are known. We often see inspirational ads and advertisement for advocacy about disabled people living their lives and being inspirational, but there isn't a lot of recognition for disabled people or disabled students in our education system and the struggles that we experience just to graduate. So we see a lot of almost like theater of people advocating for disabled students and saying how inspirational we are, but not a lot of attention to the struggles and the things that we actually need to facilitate our success. There's also a lot of fear as a disabled person, because you see all of these accommodations that you need, and oftentimes people don't want to provide it. And so just turning more attention, more exposure to actual disabled people and paying attention to what they say that they need. For example, at my school, I'm the first deaf ASG president that they've ever had, and a lot of deaf students didn't even know that that was possible, didn't even know that a deaf student was allowed to be president of ASG. And I'm constantly reminding people, reminding my deaf peers of what we can do and what the limitations that we have or we think we have are often not true and are just based on what we have seen or haven't seen. So I think putting more attention to the success that we do have is really important to remove that fear from disabled students so that they know that they can do everything that they see their peers do. And I don't see a lot of attention, a lot of exposure, a lot of display of the success that we do have. And I think it's important to have that as well.
Thank you so much for that insight, Alexis. All right, so moving on, I will entertain 2 questions from the audience. So at this time, would the audience like to ask our wonderful student panelists a few questions? You could raise your hand or submit it in the chat. I will give it a minute. All right, so I see Lenny Starr.
It's Lene.
I'm so sorry, Lene.
No, it's okay. So like, I guess something that I wanted to ask was like, what if I see another disabled student not getting the accommodations that they need? Can I also help them get the accommodations they need too? And we help each other with that.
So which one from our student panelists would like to answer that question? Anyone? Could you reword the question really quickly? You could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the question was asking, so what can we as students do if we see, you know, a disabled student who is not receiving the resources or accommodations that they need? So if we firsthand witnesses, what can we do to help that student? I believe that is the question.
Valerie just sent me, just show me
Ah.
how she sent it. She needed me to put, in
The question that you were asking was kind of correct of what
Would one of our student panelists like to answer that question?
Vice President Marco, I don't mind answering, like giving a little information.
Go ahead.
I think you have to be willing to speak up when you see that. Go to the DPS office with the student if they want to go with you, but if just yourself, you can go to the DPS office, ask to speak to the supervisor or the person in charge of the DPS office and let them know, I've seen this. I've seen students not being able to get the accommodation and what's being done. Don't be afraid to, you know, question it and then follow up on it, follow through, find out, are those services or is that person receiving the services that they're supposed to be receiving? If not, then take the step further and keep going up in the administration and even get support from fellow students. Like you go to your student government, such as I'm a student government president, so is one of the presidents, so is one of the other panelists. And we're receptive to that. We want to hear from students. So we often have direct lines of communication with administration and different things. And we can show support, like we're students and we back these students getting these services, or this student is not getting the service we want to know what's being done, what can be done. So utilize fellow students, utilize your own voice, get the feedback from, even ask other DPS students, are you getting this kind of service? Like you can even do your own groundwork level to find out, is this a gap that other students are receiving? And like I said, it doesn't have to be other students, it can be just that one student, because every one student matters. So it's great that if you have that ability to hear that from a student, to once again use your voice, follow through, and see about getting that done. And then all else fails, you can always make a resolution and take to the SSCCC and get state support. So there's many levels of support that you can try to help with lack of accommodation.
Thank you so much for answering that question, Rousseau. So if time allows us, we'll be entertaining one more question. I did see it on the Zoom. Liz? Liz, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I was just in terms of disabilities, just auditory process deficits, just different disabilities that can really affect them more in the academic domain. I guess I'm asking, a lot of our individuals who have physical disabilities, we see support such as ramps, access to wheelchairs, different things, but a lot of times our kiddos with cognitive difficulties don't always receive support. So are there supports out there for learners with learning disabilities?
Would any of our student panelists like to answer that question? Alexis?
Oh, yes. Definitely, there's a wide array of disabilities that seek services with the SPS. And the choices that we have sometimes are limited in terms of services, even though there's a wider range of disabilities than just that, which I think is why it would be good to provide more education to faculty and staff about specific disabilities and things that they need so that they can learn about the kinds of accommodations that might be needed that may not be aware about. For example, for deaf people, having a note taker, having interpreters is important. For example, making sure that the interpreters have access to me through their microphones and technology that is advanced enough to accommodate all of these services is also very important. And those are specific needs to the deaf and hard of hearing community. And then there's a list for people who have autism, different kinds of learning disabilities. So they really should be providing more education on what all these specific disabilities need, which is why I think there needs to be better education and training and workshops to make sure that there's more knowledge about the types of services that exist and that are needed, not the limited list that we have now.
Thank you so much for answering that question, Alexis. And due to time constraints, we'll go ahead and move on to our DSPS representatives. But before we do that, thank you so much to all our student panelists, Alexis, Rousseau, and Olivia, especially for bringing awareness to this topic. It's very important. Your input, your experiences with disabilities, it's very important for us to listen and for everybody to know about and be informed. Thank you so much, all three of you, for being here. You all did a wonderful thing.
Thank you. And President Marco, can I say one quick thing in close, or for the panelists?
Yeah, of course.
Thanks. I also wanted to say thank you. It was amazing hearing all the work that's being done, and we may face obstacles and challenges, but the fact that we continue to be here, continue to be students, we're overcoming those challenges. I have a friend who's blind, and I think to myself, wow, like for him to go to school, like what opportunities and different things are available to him. And then even he doesn't even know sometimes. So just getting the education out there, letting people with different kinds of disabilities know that there's something for them. And even if there's not, advocate for it. Don't be scared. And I saw someone ask in the chat if online has hindered or helped. And I like to make a quick plug that it's helped me just because it's made some things accessible. And yes, thank you. This was awesome. And I'm honored to be part of the panel and be with the fellow panelists here today.
Thank you all so much for being here. Really, thank you so much. All right, so now we will be moving on to our DSPS representatives. We have Stormy Miller Sabia. Stormy, if you could introduce yourself really quickly before we go on to the first question.
Sure, and just a huge thank you to SSCCC for the invitation to be here. It's really just an honor to be in community with you all and have the opportunity to represent disability support programs and services. I'm Stormy Miller Sabia. I am one of our directors of student services at College of Marin, and I work most closely with our student accessibility services, our DSPS program here at College of Marin. And I've been serving in this capacity since 2017, and prior to that, I was with another community college district down south in disability support programs and services. So again, thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much for that introduction. All right, we will move on to the first question. Next slide, please. So based on the responses, from our student panelists, what advice would you give students with these challenges that were shared with us?
Thank you for that question. And, I've just been listening to you all, and there's some words that have been coming to mind that I've been feverishly taking notes, but also some things that I just noticed in terms of themes of the conversation that were articulated by Roselle and Alexis and Olivia. And I just wanted to share some of those words. First and foremost, ableism and how it manifests in spaces, how it manifests even within our programs, right? And humbly, I say, there's this constant self-reflection and checking myself when it's manifesting, even in the way that I operate. And so that's something that I always like to put at the forefront when we see these societal constructs of minds and bodies and our assumptions around what is normal and what should be, and how that might come up in terms of the way that we are communicating with other individuals and beings around needs. And so that's something that I'm hoping that I continue to do, my colleagues continue to do, that we all collectively continue to do, is name when ableism is manifesting and call it out, because we don't know what we don't know. And when we're doing this work around equity, and when we're thinking about, Alexis was talking about intersectional oppression, more and more we need to think about the intersect of ableism and racism, and what are we going to do to disrupt that in these educational spaces, right? Accountability was coming to mind, right? And we talked about, I was listening to the references around training, professional learning, continuing to partnership, leaning in and lifting up your voices, right? And how we don't do this in silos. DSPS folks that work in this field, many of us do it out of love, but by no means are we the experts. We are not the experts of you, your body, your needs, right? You are the expert, right? Those individuals who identify as disabled, those are the folks that are the experts. And we're just in community together, right? To do this work. And so that came to mind as well. Co-creating. I loved Olivia's remark around disability as a community, and really using spaces to really think about identity, disability as identity, and the pride that exists within that identity, right? And the power that exists there as well, when Alexis was talking about successes. So the advice in terms of what I would say to the challenges that were referenced when you're working with offices that, really don't appear or are not equipped to be able to serve you in the way that you need to be served, and specifically as it relates to access and reasonable accommodation, or when individuals are, thinking they're doing a good thing by saying, what is it that you need? But we don't know what we don't know, and we're doing this collectively, right? And exploring, how can we be a support, but then also really highlight and lift up some of the challenges that you've had, and co-create those possibilities there. I always like to share that there's no exhaustive list around accommodations and as it relates to access. We do that together. That's one of the beautiful things about this work, create the flexibility, the creativity that we can lift up and play around with as we think about our educational spaces, even transforming over the past 3 years. And before that, and what's to come, we'll have to think differently about the way in which we do this work. The biggest advice, and I want to go back to accountability, is around one could sit here and say, advocate, don't stop. And there is this shared accountability, right? Communicating when things are working, when they're not working. But there's also this expectation for us to do better, right? And so I think extending that opportunity for there to be partnership in doing this, and that, yes, we'll do our own work, right? But we need to do that together in community with you, with faculty, with staff who may be planning events, with our broader community. When we don't know things, and there's lots of things that I don't know and my team don't know, then how are we working with community organizations that oftentimes are engaging in these conversations? So that's an opportunity for us to do that, and naming when things aren't working for you is one of the best things that you can do for us. And when you're feeling like it's still not being acknowledged, then I would lean in thinking about ASG and the role that they play. Someone referenced, if there's a resolution that needs to be passed, how can we call upon other student organizations, other student partners, individuals who are using DSPS services to really help lift up some of those concerns. But I would also say this is an opportunity. This is a recording that will be on YouTube that some of my colleagues are here today, that we should be eager to engage in terms of how we can address the challenges that have been referenced, not just Stormy from COM, but how do we do this as community? Because what's happening at College of Marin could be happening at Sac City, could be happening at College of the Siskiyous, could be happening at Reedley. And so we need to be thinking about how do we support each other, so that we see, when we look at the data, we see those outcomes shift in terms of completion, graduation, and individuals accomplishing, students accomplishing what they're wanting to accomplish. So I hope that I heard a lot of challenges. I hope that I was able to lift that up in the time that we have together. And I want to say that I'll continue to process what's been shared and look for forums and opportunities to be able to communicate more around how we can do this work together.
Thank you so much for that response, Stormy. All right, moving on to the second question. So then, what advice would you give students who may not be diagnosed, but have disabilities and may need DSPS support in this area?
Yeah, I really love this question. And oftentimes what I'll share with when I hear this and when I'm communicating with other members of my team here at COM, is that that ultimately we're student accessibility services, and access means many things and different things to individuals, right? And there's individualized approaches to access. And I would say, with a diagnosis, without a diagnosis, you got documentation, don't have documentation. If you are experiencing some challenges in the educational environment, there are barriers to you feeling like you can be successful here. Again, this goes back to being equity active and equity forward. It's our role and our responsibility as administrators, faculty, and staff to think about what are those institutional barriers that we need to remove, so that more individuals have an accessible, welcoming, and inclusive space at our respective colleges. So I would say, come see us. Have a well, give us a call, send us an email, walk through our doors, if that, whatever is most comfortable in terms of accessing DSPS. I wouldn't stray away from communicating with us or even engaging in a conversation because of this piece around diagnosis, not having diagnosis. Because if that's important, if there's more information that you're wishing to know about who you are and what you're experiencing, let's do that together. Are there referrals? Are there other organizations internally? Do we need to work with our mental health resource team? Do we need to work with one of our community partners? Do we internally have the resources that might provide increased clarity around what's occurring for you? But it shouldn't be a hindrance to accessing and receiving services. And I think that that's a misconception there. And I think some of that is because of, maybe a misconception because of what we put out. That almost seems like there's this barrier to even being able to have the conversation around access needs and what that might look like with our support. So it doesn't matter. Come see us. Anything in the realm of access, reasonable accommodation, or even an individual holistically, you're looking for support around basic needs being met. We want to be a resource to students within our respective colleges and outside as well, even if you're not enrolled. We're open and we're available to have the conversation around needs.
Thank you so much for that, Stormy.
You're welcome.
So now we will be moving on to our Chancellor's Office representative, Mia Keeley. If you'd like to introduce yourself very briefly before we jump into the questions.
Sure. My name is Mia Keeley. I'm a Dean in Educational Services and Support for the Chancellor's Office, and DSPS is one of the programs that my team oversees.
All right, thank you for that. So first question, are there resources at the state level for DSPS students?
So typically, no. The state at our level, we're the governing body that oversees the program at the colleges. So we distribute resources to the colleges so they can in turn provide accommodations and services to students. One important role we play though is we do look at funding levels. This year we did ask for an increase in DSPS program funding for the state budget for 23-24. Just think that's important for students to be aware of, that we are advocating for additional dollars. Now, we didn't see those in the January budget, but we did see a COLA, which is a cost of living increase of 8.3% for $13 million additional. So just some important things for students to be aware of. So at our level, we're overseeing the program statewide. We're providing technical assistance and professional development to DSPS program staff at the colleges in order for them to better serve students.
Thank you so much for that. And so our next and final question for you. At this time, is there any new regulation, policy, or legislation that may impact DSPS students?
Yeah, I know we're pressed for time, but I do want to mention two things that I think are important for students. The first being, we are proposing a new funding formula for the statewide DSPS program. And we're doing this to increase equity in funding across the state. The proposed change includes a $200,000 base funding for each college to ensure that they can fund one full-time position, which has been an issue for our smaller rural colleges. And it also moves to a DSPS straight student headcount and a 10% expanded college effort. One other important thing it does, it takes away the 95% guarantee that colleges see every year in place of that $200,000 base. This might be really complicated, but as simple as it can, when you have a 95% guarantee for funding colleges year over year, what happens is some colleges maintain a high level of funding, even though their student level has dropped. And it means smaller colleges and newer colleges aren't able to have funding growth because we're maintaining high levels of funding for those other colleges. So some equity changes in our funding formula. I know we're at time, but the last thing I really wanted to mention is that the Chancellor's Office is convening a Universal Design for Learning task force. And what we're hoping that will do is help our faculty design their courses to be more accessible from the start, so that on the back end, hopefully we'll need less accommodations, and that these classes will just be accessible for all students without students having to go through barriers to access accommodations. So those are the two big things.
Thank you for that. And I know we're a little over the hour, but that's fine. That's okay. This topic is very important to us. So if we move on to the next slide, I will allow for the audience to ask 2 questions, just so we can get more insight on or more information from our DSPS representatives. So I will now move on to the audience. If anyone would like to ask our DSPS representatives any questions, any further information on DSPS or this topic, please raise your hand and I will go ahead and call on you. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions, but I know there was a question in the chat earlier. I was hoping if both of you could actually answer if possible. It's from James K. And they said, do you as DSPS representatives, do you think remote learning has helped or hindered this accessibility to DSPN students? And do you think there are any solutions like tech that can help with this? Anything that you've heard or based on your experience during the pandemic, remote learning? If you could please give us more information on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in on this question. I think it's both. I believe that for some, Roselle was speaking to, the some of the benefits, right? But I've also heard from students, and I've heard that as well, right? This is, increased access to online offerings, which makes it easier for me and the way in which I need to engage, and then also take care of responsibilities, whether I'm a caregiver, have children, have to work, other considerations. So it has provided increased access, for some, and supported the way in which some learn. And then for others, we saw a significant number. I think one of the things that's most telling within DSPS is prior to the pandemic, if you look at the data dashboard on the Chancellor's office, we were serving 118,000 individuals. That went down significantly, 92,000, right? Huge impact in terms of the number of students that were served. And we continue to see that within DSPS programs. One could say, well, maybe less students need the services because of, increased accessibility. And we are also hearing from students now saying, I'm coming back now that your doors are open. I took a break because online learning, remote learning wasn't working for me. And so I think tech can be a solution to a certain extent, but it's understanding how to leverage the technology, not on all fronts, right? How are we most knowledgeable as DSPS representatives and how to use the technology? How are we continuously learning as it evolves and shifts, to make good use of it, and then working with faculty and staff on, what it might look like in the classroom, how students might utilize it, and what functionality does it have? Tech is only as good as, as one knows how to use it, right? But if it could be quite costly. But I think that's the piece and the work that needs to be done, and really leveraging it, working as a, statewide to really think about what systems have the most promise, and where we might be able to work collectively in our learning and understanding around its benefits. But I also think that there's some pieces around, we've seen that technology and the way that we engage is also reduced human connection and the interaction and the conversations that need to occur, so you can best see and hear me and understand who I am and my needs, right? And so that piece can't be forgotten in terms of the way that we support one another and think about community and collective care, right? So it's a both and there, and I think that we can't forget all that we've learned over the past several years, just being able to engage in this way. to be able to be together when we're all at various places in the state is a beautiful thing. And we need to ensure that these spaces are also accessible to all individuals. So are we doing that when we create virtual spaces? It's so important that we think about that and put that at the forefront. So
Thank you so much for that, Stormy. It was definitely insightful to hear that information. Mia, I don't mean to, put you on the spot, but what's the chancellor's office and the state level perspective on this, the question I just asked?
I think all of what Stormy said is the truth. I also think that what the pandemic let us do is it let us see that we can respond quickly. We can be flexible and innovative when we're put on the spot and we need to be. And I really hope that colleges keep that innovation in mind now, even though, we're at the tail end, hopefully, of the pandemic. So it would be great that we could think of those, innovations and continue them when we're not in this time of emergency. So I think that's really key. I think some students really benefit from being able to access services remotely. That was something a lot of our colleges were hesitant to do prior to the pandemic. So I think there were some positives that came out of it, and I really would just like for us to be able to expand on them. The main thing that the Chancellor's Office really wants to focus on is removing barriers for students across the board. And so I think technology and just a new ways of accomplishing that are going to be key.
Thank you so much for that, Mia. So this does conclude our panelist portion of the webinar. But before everyone leaves, we do have a few minor announcements. But before I do that, I do want to thank all our panelists here today, our student panelists and our DSPS representatives, Olivia, Alexis, and Roussel. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your stories. It was really touching, and it just opens up a whole new world of possibilities and things to, usher in change so that we can make the higher education journey in the community college system more equitable and accessible and inclusive to all students. And thank you so much to our DSPS representatives who are here with us today and were able to give us so much insightful information. So if we could all give our panelists a virtual round of applause, that'd be greatly appreciated. And once again, thank you all so much for being here. So our SSCCC upcoming events before everybody leaves, we will be hosting General Assembly at the Westin in Long Beach on Friday, March 31st, all the way to Sunday, April 2nd. It'll be in a month, so mark your calendars for that. We also have advocacy in April, which will be on Wednesday, April 12th. It'll be a hybrid, and if you have any questions, please contact the Vice President of Legislative Affairs, Zachariah Wooden at vpla@ssccc.org. And then regional delegate assemblies where information is distributed to the local student body associations. Contact your region's regional affairs director and they should have all that information. Then we could go to the last slide. All right, if you have any other questions after this, please feel free to contact myself at vp@ssccc.org, as well as our wonderful DEIA Vice Chair, Casey Chang at vpc@ssccc.org, and we will be more than happy to answer any other questions. And we do have one more slide. Make sure you're following us. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at @SSCCC_official. And make sure to visit our website, www.ssccc.org. On these platforms, we post all our information, upcoming events, and everything that we're up to. And so just make sure to follow. It really helps out, and it helps distribute information to everyone in the California community college system and beyond. So with that, this concludes the entirety of our webinar. And again, thank you to our panelists and our audience for being here. And I cannot stress how much this is meaningful and important to all our work and to every single one of us. So thank you all again so much.
thank you.